Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast of a bunch of writers sitting around drinking tasty beverages and talking about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your writers today are Chaz and Karen Brenchley, John Schmidt, and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 118, Beans, the Best of Chaz Brenchley. I'm excited to do this because Chaz, one of our own, has new stuff coming out, and it's very exciting.
I'm excited to do this, but I have to confess I was the one who came up with beans because he makes such fantastic beans. But tell us about your book, Chaz. Wait, which one?
That's what I was going to say. Which book would you like to hear about first? Actually, no, let's do everything in all the wrong order, because then we will...
Because then it doesn't matter what order things are if everything's all in the wrong order.
Oh, yes. God, I can't believe you queued that up so perfectly. So everything in all the wrong order, besides being the description of how we're going to discuss things, is...
It is a thing I have yearned for 30 years, probably. When I was possibly 40. When I was actually 45. When I was a teenager and reading science fiction devouringly, I practically read nothing else apart from school books. There was this commonplace thing that science fiction writers who published a lot of short stories, they would have collections of their short stories published every few years. And then as they moved on towards the end of their careers, there would be a best of collection. And I pined and I yearned for a future in which I would have a best of collection. And now I do. It's called Everything in All the Wrong Order, The Best of Chaz Brenchley. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's from Subterranean Press, who make beautiful, beautiful books.
They do. Was this Geraldine Lance behind you?
Geraldine was certainly involved in the production, yeah. The initiative came from Bill Schaefer, who runs and owns the press. And he's been a friend of mine for decades, though we've rarely met. We got to know each other through writing actual letters on actual paper, because it was pre-email. And then he used to phone me on a Sunday morning, my time in the UK, and Sophie Cat would lie across my shoulders and purr into the telephone all the way to America. Yeah, so we've been friends forever. And he said, actually, Chaz, I was thinking it's about time you had a best of collection. And now we do. I'm just so thrilled.
Wait, you also write so much horror and murder and death. Was this a subtle way of saying I'm going to kill you?
No.
I mean, you just expressed that the best of is, the last thing they do before you.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely not true. If you look back at the careers of the great science fiction, the great long-lived science fiction writers, you will see there's a best of collection that crops up maybe halfway through their career or 2/3 of the way, and then a while later there'll be a very best of. So on and so forth. Because, of course, people want to see copies of, the great stories, the famous stories still going the rounds. But, of course, by the time somebody has published their best of, it's perfect. I would have 3 or 4 copies of a particular story in various collections and anthologies. And so you're always wanting to include new ones as well. I mean, this is called my best of, and it has 3 stories that have never been published before. So it's a bit arrogant, but...
Well, that makes all the wrong order then, unless they're at the very end, or...
No, they're not. Actually, I mean, I'm determined to insist that the stories are absolutely in the exact right order. The title comes from a short story I wrote, ironically enough, called Everything in All the Wrong Order, which Bill, the publisher, said, I'd really like to call this collection Everything in All the Wrong Order, but I can't remember if that story is good enough to be in this collection. So I went back and reread it, and it didn't quite make the cut. But I said, Bill, I don't want to put this story in the collection, but can we use the title anyway? And he said, yes, of course we can. So we did.
Well, I'd like to point out that one of his collections, his previous collection, Bitter Waters, he won the Lambda Award for. So, these collections of Chaz's are very, very good.
Yeah, but that was only that good because you edited it.
Well, I helped you with this one too.
That's true.
So that's a great sign that you helped him with this one too. And I have a question. So the Bitter Waters had a couple themic elements in it from my point of view, one being water and one being some of the characteristics of some of the characters. Mm-hmm. Is there any themic elements through All the Wrong Order, or is it just what you decided was the best across all of your many ways of writing?
Yeah, it's not what I think of as a collection of just the absolute best. Partly because, as I say, there are 3 new stories in it, and those have yet to face the judgment of the world. But also, Bill did say that he didn't want too much crossover with Bitter Waters, which it's still out there, it's still selling. And I'd put a lot of my favourite stories into Bitter Waters, so some of those had to step back for a while. But if there are themes in because everything is, it is taken from right across my career. The oldest story in there I wrote in the early 1980s when I was 22 or 23 probably. And so if there are themes, if themes emerge from a reading of these stories in this order, they will be the themes of my life. There's a lot of gay characters in there, inevitably, and there's a lot of water. I do not know why I have an obsession with water, given that I grew up about as far from the sea as you can get in the UK.
Which isn't very far.
It's not very far, but we didn't have a car, so coasts were pretty much inaccessible. But I was in Oxford, and Oxford is a city of rivers and canals. So I did grow up on the water quite often, never in the water because I can't swim. But themes, fey boys and sensible girls. Quite a lot of my fiction revolves around that.
Wow, that kind of describes my entire 20s.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Mine too.
There's also like a few favorites from the Bitter Waters, like Keep the Aspidocoloni Floating, and a couple of the others.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of overlap, but they're again the thematic kinds of things. One of the things I find really interesting about Chaz's work, I think when you were in Wyoming for
for Launchpad, yes,
for Launchpad,
which that's Astronomy for Science Fiction Writers 101. It's a 1-week residential course, and they slam it into you constantly. I've rarely felt my brain being so stretched. It was awesome.
But one of your co-members said something to you like, what do you write books about puppies and flowers? And you're like, no. People, they're. I would describe your stories as gripping and powerful and painful, but also in some ways enlightening. And I'm thinking of things like some of your Mars stories that are both sad and uplifting. Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, don't you have a Mars story on Tor.com this week?
Oh, yes, Karen. Yes, I do. There's a segue. Yeah, so I've been writing stories about Mars for a long time now. This is Mars. Mars as a province of the British Empire. I've probably talked about this before on this show.
Not enough.
Possibly not. But anyway, yeah, so there is an ongoing Patreon where I'm writing English girls' boarding school stories set on Mars. And
for adults, though. These are not
they're not I'm not writing for children. I'm writing for those adults who remember those 1930s boarding school stories with great affection, like me. It's possible I'm even writing for me. And there is a novel that I have failed to complete about 3 times now, which is about Rudyard Kipling on Mars, and I will get back to it. And there are a couple of novellas around that I'm still fiddling with, and at the moment, there are a few short stories, one of which deals with Oscar Wilde on Mars, And that's really the most serious writing about this culture that I've.
And what was the title of that one?
The title of the Oscar Wilde one was the Astrakhan, the
Hamburg,
and the Red Coal.
And wasn't that in somebody's destroyed?
Queers Destroy Science Fiction?
Queers Destroy Science Fiction.
Yes, it was.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes, it was. That's where it's first. Edited by Sean and Maguire. Yeah. So when I'm feeling serious, I write a short story about Mars. And the Tor.com story is up now. It's called The Station of the 12th. It's Chaz being serious and melancholic. A lot of my stories are melancholic, I find.
I wonder why, dear.
I can't imagine.
It's your humors.
Yes.
Is it?
I think that's really it. I really do.
Well, does he eat too many beans? I found it a relief to melancholy in these uncertain times that we do not forget those. But I don't want to say anything more. So sure. I can't disagree with you that it's melancholic, but I found it in its way a relief to melancholy. So I have to ask, do you have any Martian cookbooks available?
Oh, segues. We're doing it so well. Transitions, we call them in writing. Yeah. So there is, the thing is, I do cook. I cook quite a lot.
Excellently well.
Wonderful.
Quite well. I gained so much weight after marrying him.
I'm sorry. It's all my fault.
It.
And by definition, a girls' boarding school has to have a famous cook. So the Crater School has Mrs. Bailey. And for a few years now, I've been posting Mrs. Bailey's recipes one by one on Medium. And you can find them there should you want to go and look. And it's under Mrs. Bailey's Martian Kitchen, I think. A very old friend of mine and a very nice person, Cheryl Morgan, runs a small press in the UK. And
Wizard's Tower Press?
Wizard's Tower Press, as it happens, yes. And she wanted to publish the Crater School books as I finished them. So I said, yeah, sure, fine, woohoo. And the first one is out now, 3 Twins of the Crater School. You can buy it in ebook, hardback, or paperback. I may possibly have mentioned while my agent and Cheryl and I were discussing this lot, I may possibly have mentioned that there was an emergent cookbook happening on Medium. And she said, I'll take that too. So at some point, I think we might have been hoping for this Christmas, but it's probably going to be next Christmas now. Mrs. Bailey's Martian Kitchen will emanate as a publication.
If it has the sesame buns, it's going to be worth it.
It's got the sesame buns. Of course, it's got the sesame buns.
They've got lovely.
People have been known to kill each other for the last sesame bun.
Oh, that's only you serial killer writer. The rest of us projecting. Yeah. The rest of us just hide them from you because you have knives.
Well, the thing is, unlike the rest of you, I get the first one that's hot out of the oven, so I don't have to fight for the last one. I have the first and best.
I just went and looked at it. I had no idea you had so many different possibilities. This is horrible.
Not horrible. It's wonderful. Also, Wizard Towers Press, aren't they going to be doing Outremer? That's right. Your Outremer books?
Yes, they are.
Let us back up because people may have never read your Outremer books.
Yes.
So.
Okay, so when I was 12, I met Tolkien. And I spent the next 5 years writing really bad Tolkien-esque fantasy. And when I was 17, I realized just how bad it was and declared that I was going to write no more fantasy until I had a completely different idea that was nothing to do with Tolkien, whatever. Time passed. I started writing. I started publishing. I published crime books. I published horror books. I did not publish fantasy because I was clinging to that teenage oath. And then in the mid-ish 90s, got a brochure through my door in the mail because I belonged to the Folio Society, which is basically a book club in the UK that prints beautiful illustrated editions of generally well-known books. And I mean, they do fiction, they do non-fiction. And this brochure was an advertisement for their forthcoming publication of Stephen Runciman's History of the Crusades in 3 volumes. And I mean, I read the book years ago and had not thought anything beyond, yeah, that's really interesting history. And then I was just sitting there looking at this brochure thinking, oh, how can I conceivably justify buying a really beautiful edition when I have the paperbacks on my shelf over there? It was like a bolt from the blue. It was the postman delivering my big fantasy idea. Because, I mean, to be sure, people had written Crusader analog fantasies prior to this, but I just had not read them. This seemed a wholly new thing to me. So I spent a couple of years researching in a way I have never done since, and had never done before that, because obviously this was a big thing. And then I tentatively wrote a proposal and some sample chapters, and very tentatively approached my then agent, because she had told me when I signed on with her 15 years earlier that she didn't do fantasy. So I said, look, I know you don't do fantasy, but I want to write this fantasy. Will you handle it for me, or should I go and find another agent? And she said, of course I'll handle it for you. How dare you? All your writing comes through me. And she sent off the proposal to various publishers, but one of them came back within a week saying, I want this. So we waited a while, but nobody else dived in, so we didn't get an auction. And we sold the book to John Jarrold at what was he? Random House UK, I think, at the time. Yeah, he's now my agent, but that's a whole different other story. Yeah, so I wrote 3 big fat volumes. I had planned 4, but one way or another, I think because fantasies traditionally come in 3s, only 3 of them were contracted for. And when I delivered the second, John had left the company. He was no longer involved in the project at all. And my new editor said, Chaz, how many books are there going to be? And I said, 4. And he said, we only have contracts for 3. And I said, yeah, I know. But John always said that. And he said, actually, we'd kind of like you to wrap it up in 3 if you can. So the 3rd volume is very, very long indeed, or was. And I still feel that the series is a bit cropped off. But anyway, there it was. And it went out into the world and got some nice reviews, and nobody bought it. That's a story of my life. I have lovely reviews. But so it dropped out of print eventually, as they do. And we finally, after years and years of asking, we now have the rights back. And my lovely friend Cheryl Morgan, who was one of the first people to review these books when they came out, and she reviewed them fulsomely. She loved them. And she said, let me, I want. So we will be publishing alternately Outremer books and Creator School books through the next couple of years, at least.
Excellent. So we're not going to run out anytime soon.
No, and the thing is, the 3 fat volumes in the British edition, we sold American rights a few years later. And they said, actually, we have this sneaky plan where we want to publish these books monthly, but we want you to cut each of them in half. So we have 6 slender volumes that we can bring out rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat consecutively. And I said, okie doke, have you ever done this before? And they said, we tried it once. And I said, did it work? And they said, no, but we want to try it again. So I went through them, and basically the first 2 is pretty much the British text, just with a little adjustment in order to make a convenient place to cut the books in 2 and have them make sense. The 3rd one, I took advantage of the opportunity and cut it significantly, as well as cutting it in half. So the American edition is now, the 6-book version is my favorite edition. It's the author preferred text, except that obviously, because Cheryl is doing new editions, I'll be going through them again and no doubt fiddling again, because I can't not. But yeah, it will be the American 6-volume style. So we will have 6 slim volumes.
We may need you to stop and write a blog for us on our site, all on the topic of rights and moving and publishing and changing just for the story, as I've known people that have had to fight so hard to get the rights to their work back here and there. And when for fun, when or not, how do you get people to let it go? It's an interesting puzzle in the industry.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, traditional contracts were for the length of copyright, which meant, sort of originally 50 years after the author's death.
Thanks, Disney.
And more recently, 70 years after the author's death. And what with the radical changes that have overcome publishing in the last 20 years, an awful lot of writers are sitting there looking at an awful lot of their backlist books, which have fallen out of print and are completely not available. And, they can make them available. They can they can self-publish them, or they can find a small publisher, as I have, who will put them out again. And all you have to do is get those rights back from the mainstream publisher, who is not using them, who is gaining nothing by simply possessing these copyright. Well, they don't possess the copyright, but they possess the right
to publish,
and to solely to publish for the rest of my life and beyond. And they are yielding on this, but with a lot of with them big mainstream publishers, it's a very slow and difficult process because you have to argue for a change in the contract. And the other thing is that they say, but look, we have kept it in print. We have an ebook edition, and ebooks by definition never go out of print. So yeah, it's a problem which the industry is addressing slowly, but having to backpedal through. Yeah, if you started your career in the 70s, as I did, that's an awful lot of moving back and trying to reclaim rights that were signed away then.
That is definitely tricky. I mean, how would we turn this around? Because I have two questions, the hard one and the fun one. If they then wanted to, say, make a TV series or a movie out of it, they have to go buy it from the publisher, I presume.
Probably not. Most sensible agents, at any rate, will keep movie and TV rights off a publishing contract,
right.
Very firmly and explicitly. But this is one of the reasons, obviously, why publishers do want to just hang on to rights they're not currently utilising, because people do come along, a decade later and say, I want to make a TV series, because Game of Thrones has happened. Now suddenly grim, dark fantasies are very much
Shadow and Bone, even the YA versions.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, someone could still look at, we did have a film person look at the Outremer books and say, God, I'd really love to do those, but I'd never get it through the studio. And now they might. So
yay.
Yeah. But that's why they hold on to the rights, because if a film or TV producer had come to me 10 years or 5 years ago, last year even, and said, I want to do Outremer, then those books suddenly have a value again. And the publishers could bring out a tie-in edition when the film broke, and they would make lots of money in, which I wouldn't have resented, honestly, because I prefer. I've spent a professional lifetime, waiting for those big TV deals, and none of them have happened. So I'd rather just get the books back out there. I really would.
Yeah, for a new generation, as it were, because they really are. The kids are all right. They're reading new things.
Yep.
Yeah. In terms of short bits and tour, Karen, didn't you get a poem published recently too?
No, I sold a poem. It has not come out yet, but I sold it to Fantasy Magazine, which is online. I sold a poem. It's a reply to a poem by a very good writer that was that had been made into a cartoon poster that hung in my bathroom, and so I used to see it daily, and I thought, oh, that's a good poem, and then I read it for a while, and then I realized, I'm actually kind of pissed at that when you actually think about it, and so this is my reply. but I don't want to give away the name of the writer or the name of the poem until my poem comes out, because that's what Twitter's for.
It is. But I actually had a question on Fantasy Magazine, because is it still called Fantasy Magazine, or is it one of the ones that got merged into Lightspeed or any of the others?
No, it is. It is Fantasy Magazine. It's standalone. It has its own editor. And
the relaunch with Arlie and Christine.
Yes. Uh-huh. Arlie does the science fiction one, and Christine does fantasy. And there's a poetry editor too, I think, which is separate. I'm not entirely sure on all of this because names are hard. But yeah, they're both of them are out, separate magazines.
Changing from names are hard. When can we expect your poem? Dates are hard.
I don't know. They haven't given me a date for that. They said soon.
Excellent.
So
you do have a date for your forthcoming short story, though, don't you?
Oh yes, I do have. I have a short story coming out in Parsec Magazine, which is a brand new British magazine, or I should say, magazine from the British publisher who also does Newcon Press.
The editor. Ian Waits, our old friend, is editing Parsec. It's being published by PS Publishing, which is basically my old friend Pete.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. So anyway, I saw that this was that this was happening. Long story that I won't go into, but I saw that there was this new magazine, and I had finished this story that I had sent to an anthology, and I knew it wasn't right for the anthology, but they sent it back. So I sent it to him, and he's an old friend of mine. And he said, "You write?" And I said, yes, I do. And he said, "Oh, I really liked it. I'm going to save it, I'm going to save it in my the second look pile." And by the time I woke up the next day, I would like to buy this, and it will be in the second edition of the magazine, Parsec, Parsec, of course. And it's online only. So it's an online only magazine. It's just like an ebook, but it's a magazine. And it's in the November-December of this year issue. So it will drop in November. And it's called The Bayesian Theory of Wishes. And it's a Black Lives Matter story. And with a little bit of a Bayesian statistical theory and some other magic people and real human beings in it. And I hope people like the story as much as I liked writing it. So,
well, we all look forward to it. As a matter of fact, we're going to put links to all of the stuff we mentioned and the writing and the thing coming out and the stories and Chaz's stuff that you can already buy on Amazon on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can also find us on Facebook or Twitter. We love email. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is David Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Ingberg. You can hear more from Michael Ingberg on manyhatsmusic.com. And hey, thanks for listening.